leaders have to look in the mirror. You can't go pointing fingers. You got to look at yourself and say, what I did, take responsibility, learn from it, and move on.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Ronin Leadership Podcast. This is Mike Howard. It's been a few weeks since I've been able to actually do one of these. Janice and I have been traveling. I did some travels to Asia, came back home, and then went to see the grandkids in North Carolina. So it's been a while, but it's good to be able to get back on track. We're in the midst of the holiday season. I'm sure all of you are all very busy. But I still appreciate all the comments that you make on the previous podcasts. And if you continue to like the podcast, please tell your friends about it. Hit the like button on the screen, subscribe button, tell your friends about it. And also, as I always say, I always preface this with this is a shameless plug, but you got to do this. If you haven't already, please pick up my first book, The Art of Ronin Leadership. I wrote that now going on 2 years, and then the latest one is The Art of Executing Ronin Leadership Strategies. The first one is more about my journey of leadership, and a lot of it has to do with the mistakes I made along the way, and hopefully lessons I've learned. The second is more of a how-to-do book. A lot of you gave me feedback saying that you liked the first one, but how do you put the meat to the bone? So that's kind of the second one. But yeah, certainly I encourage you can get it on Amazon.com or MikeHowardAuthor.com. Put that aside, get that out of the way. I'm really excited today about the guest that we have. Dave McGowan is a dear friend. Janice and I consider Dave and Amy family. We've shared a lot of time in the saddle in the security industry, and I consider Dave to be one of the preeminent leaders in our industry. And even though Dave and I come from the CSO world, this leadership podcast, is really for anybody in any enterprise. But it's really great to welcome you, Dave, to the podcast, and thank you for taking the time out of your, I know, very busy schedule to spend some time with us today.
My pleasure, Mike. Always a pleasure to spend some time with you, and obviously a great topic to chat about.
Awesome. So I guess to begin with, as we do with all of our guests, tell us a little bit about your background, so where you came from, how you grew up in the business world, and how you got to where you are right now, which is the Chief Security Officer over at Kaiser Permanente in California.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So I'm sure a journey many others have somehow taken to get to where they are in our business. I actually cut my teeth in the security industry as a contract guard, trying to fund my college education, amongst other ways to fund my college education. So in my summertime during college, I'd spend the entire summer working for an organization at that point. It was called Guardsmark, very well known back in the business, and so that was my first exposure. When I was graduating school, I was hoping to get into the military. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for me. But in order to start paying back all of the other college bills, I needed to get gainfully employed. There happened to be in the newspaper a want ad for a security manager in a discount retailer in the Northeast. It was called Caldwell. So I went to the interview, and when I got to the interview, they were actually just finishing up a case, which I thought was quite fascinating. It was about transit theft and supply chain security. And subsequent to that, I spent some time with the hiring manager. And at that point in time, he said, "You've got a college education?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "Liberal arts?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "They teach you how to think?" I said, "That's what liberal arts is all about." He said, "You're hired." So no experience, actually didn't know what I was getting myself into at the time, but found it to be a very rewarding and fulfilling, first step into the security industry. Learned a lot. I would say at that point in time in my life, probably quite naive to the things I then experienced in the security business, but started to learn very quickly. And I think that business was also very good because it gave you exposure to so much, traditional security management, investigations, auditing.
Hmm.
There was a full breadth of exposure you got at a very early age. So that's where it all began.
Oh,
I moved around a couple times after that. I spent time in the field for Caldor. I was pulled into the corporate environment to run their financial systems for the security organization at that time. So it was a whole bunch of new things that I began to learn.
hmm.
And then I took the opportunity to move to another organization in the home center business. I kind of learned a little bit about that. And then moved into the luxury business, which was where I spent the next 30 years of my security career. First with the Polo Ralph Lauren Corporation in Manhattan, New York, and then over to Tiffany and Company, where I spent almost 25 years. Uh,
Hmm.
it wasn't until I would say the last 5 years I've been thinking about um, do I have one more good move left in me, and what would that look like? And I made a conscious decision that it would have to be outside of luxury business and luxury goods. I'd like to try something new.
Yeah,
So whether that was tech or a disruptive industry or finance, et cetera, I was kind of just waiting to see what would come. Never saw the healthcare opportunity come knocking until it did, and it just so happened that that kind of opportunity coincided with COVID coming into the United States.
yeah,
So it was early in 2020 when the conversation started. The fascinating part about that was, as you can recall, Mike, the conversations on every newscast was, these heroes in healthcare that are standing at the front lines of a pandemic, helping people survive this virus. And so it became something of a great interest to me that if I could bring, some of the skill sets and mentality and processes that I do in the business of security to this organization, I felt very strongly that it was a very different mission and a very different experience. And so I've been here since December of 2020.
wow,
It's been a very quick 2 years, celebrating the 2 year anniversary last week. And
yeah,
we've got a lot going on, but we're not even still out of the COVID pandemic environment yet. It's crazy.
yeah. I mean, that's been quite a journey. Starting off as a contract security guard and ending up as a chief security officer. Yeah, because I remember when you let everyone know you were moving from Tiffany to Kaiser. I mean, that was a surprise, right? Thought you're gonna finish out your career in the luxury industry, but it's I think it's a good leadership lesson. Uh, Also that you're willing to take on new challenges and new opportunities in a whole new industry that you frankly probably didn't know a whole lot about.
Yeah, and exactly right. I think all of us that operate at this level, Mike, you know this well, is um, the challenge, right? Like, can I take my skill sets? Can I survive in a totally different environment? What's that like? How do I stretch myself professionally? And yes, healthcare, a very different industry than luxury goods. And I was very curious with the hiring manager at KP and some of the other leaders at KP. Why me? Why me coming from the East Coast and luxury goods? Like, what did you see? I think it was just a different perspective on how to manage and how to align security to drive value in an organization, whether that's luxury goods or healthcare, et cetera. There's a process and a philosophy of driving value,
Yeah,
and so it hasn't been the easiest onboarding experience. So last time I onboarded 25 years ago was you got into the business, you traveled around, you met lots of people in all different aspects of the business and
right.
embedded yourself to understand. And in this environment, you have to do it all remotely. So you're meeting people remotely. You're trying to understand the business in the midst of a pandemic. So certainly the hospitals and the medical office buildings, they don't want you there because
Sure.
they're focused on care delivery. So
Right.
it was a challenging environment to onboard.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine. I mean, I got out of the business in 2018. Sometimes I thank God, but I didn't have to deal with that. But you raised something that's really interesting. There's a parallel in our careers in that when I left government to go to Microsoft, it was totally different environment. I mean, I knew you plot me into an enterprise, I'll figure it out, right, eventually.
Mhm.
But private sector, public sector, totally different. I think it's interesting for people who are listening to this to kind of look at your mindset and how did you approach, actually processing, I'm here now, I'm the CSO here at Kaiser Permanente. Like, what are the first 3 to 4 to 5 steps that you decided you were going to do in order to sort of get your acclimated to the new milieu, so to speak?
Yeah, so it was an interesting environment, and it really it speaks to the culture of Kaiser, and in context, where Kaiser has been as an organization. So, very federated approach to management, particularly on the security end.
Hmm.
Um, and so, I think first and foremost was recognizing that coming in to first build some relationships and really not bringing in that subject matter expertise and coming in as, hey, I'm going to come and improve your security programs, et cetera. It was first coming in just to get to know people,
Okay.
and understand and be very, I think, empathetic to kind of the experience that they were going through at the time. Obviously, a pandemic, the ultimate challenge for a healthcare organization. Trying to be very understanding to that, focusing any support of the security organization to just help the organization, manage the experience of getting through the pandemic, and being very focused on our members and those coming in seeking care, and really not trying to get too far ahead of that
Hmm.
until the kind of the environment stabilized a little bit. So, really relationship building. I think one of the things that I learned early in my career is you can't come in, you can't begin to execute change, even if you have a mandate, and dismiss the efforts of the past. This organization, Kaiser, has invested significantly in security in its history, and quite frankly, in many respects, those that delivered the security and managed the security weren't the experts. Um, they weren't even security people, but just people in the healthcare system wearing, multiple hats.
Right.
So it was important to acknowledge all the great work that had been done, and to recognize that the company has invested. Now, whether as a subject matter expert, I agreed with how they handled it in the past, that's a different story. And
Sure.
that begins kind of the transformation journey to where I think they should be. But I think important to build allies in the organization, that, yes, you've done a great job, and you should be recognized for all the great work in this environment, and bringing in professional leaders in this business. Certainly not me. I would credit my team. There's even a better way to do this, and we can build upon the great work that was done before. So, I know that taking that approach, what resonated extremely well with leadership throughout the organization. And I think that was important because we're just on the precipice now of
Hmm.
actually beginning to accelerate real transformation to what I would say a real modernized healthcare protection program. Um, but the relationships over the last 2 years that have been built, and that tact of approaching management upon coming into the organization, I now have really willing partners that are, there to collaborate with and support what we're doing. So, it's an exciting time at this point.
Yeah. I mean, besides the challenges of working in a remote environment and pandemic, like you said, building those allies, taking the time to do that, I think it's really smart. It's a great lesson for people that are, taking over positions, especially especially from the government, coming into the private sector, where there's usually a command and control, and as you and I well know, It's authority by influence, more than anything else.
Yeah.
Um, and that's good. So so you look at that aspect of it and how you've taken the time to build these relationships so that you have these allies in the enterprise. So when you look at your team itself, that was you, and you sort of mentioned it a little bit, right? There's a transition piece where yes, you acknowledge the accomplishments of the past, but at some point you need to put your own footprint, your own stamp, and where you want to go. How do you approach like transitional leadership that way with teams that are already embedded and you're the newbie coming in? How do you approach that?
Yeah. So excellent question. And it was one of the things that as we started thinking about where we go as a security organization, how are we going to execute that transition? There's a couple transitions that needed to happen. One was kind of a philosophy transition. The kind of previous federated approach was the frontline healthcare leadership really kind of directed security on what security should be doing. So we needed to change that dynamic and say, actually, in this environment, we're almost the doctors. So the patient's not going to tell us what the treatment is. We're
Mhm.
actually the doctors. We practice this. We are the domain experts. But we're going to work with you like a doctor does with their patient to understand what in this environment is what are the risks? What are you concerned about? So
Right.
that process is still undergoing. That's a multi-year effort to change a very embedded culture and how it looks at security and accepting that they can be now in a collaborative and informed role as opposed to be almost being responsible for it
Mhm.
and directing security. The other thing was understanding not only the current state of the environment, but what does really Kaiser want out of its security organization, and coming to an agreement upon the fact that we really wanted to be, top in class in healthcare. What type of security leadership team does that take? It's certainly not me. It's a team that I needed to bring in that could execute that change. So Mike Foynes is one example of that from a technology innovation, but we needed programmatic um, people who could focus on programmatic innovation, contract guard force management innovation, et cetera. So uh, in a very conscious decision, Mike, was made that we would focus on building a leadership team level at the program office level and enable that team to come around the table and actually begin to craft the 3-year strategy. So I made a decision as the leader that I would not develop a strategy until we had a team of experts that they could put the strategy together through their interactions with the customer. So that is a process we began in late 2021. It was a drive to develop a 3-year strategy once the team was in place. Final members of the national leadership team were put in place earlier this year. And we
Mhm.
actually finished the crafting and delivery of the 3-year strategy on October 31st of this year. So
Nice.
that quote unquote is the easy part. The hard part now is executing, right?
Yeah,
So
executing the strategy. But you
yeah,
found the right people because you took the time to find the right top talent to be part of your leadership team, correct?
yeah, absolutely. And I think we were very intentional in our hiring. So we looked at hiring from a couple different lenses. One is we were really looking for a diverse leadership team. So actually,
Mhm.
all the initial interviews that I did to whittle down the candidates into a final grouping were all done blind. So I didn't do any video calls, nothing. It was a phone call. We scrubbed names for the most part from resumes, et cetera, so that I truly was just looking at the skill sets of individuals, and then had the first round of interviews blind, no video, so that I didn't have any of those biases come out that may affect the decisions of whittling down to the right candidates for us. So it was it was a great process, and at the end of the day, A majority of those that we brought in fit into various and diverse categories of
Mhm.
candidates, which has been an extremely powerful message, including four of our seven directors that are actually embedded in the businesses in the field that are women, which has been a fantastically supported move by us as a security organization. The other thing that we were looking for is people that really focus on transformation, never satisfied with current state, always trying to improve. People who operated in a shared service environment, and people that could communicate at a very high level. So I wanted folks that I could put in front of boards of directors. I could put them in front of, regional leaders without me having to be in the room all the time. So a very intentional approach to the leadership team that we brought in. And I would advocate selfishly that within the healthcare industry, I would put that team up against any team. I think I'm extremely proud of that team and what they've been able to accomplish. So you can imagine a brand new team coming together with the
Yeah.
charge to put a 3-year strategy together.
Wow.
Not an easy task. And
Huh.
they have really worked so diligently over the last 9 months to get that across the finish line in October. So very, very proud of the team.
Yeah, congratulations. Yeah, basically it's a Herculean task. And I suspect, and you referred to it, the diversity of your team, they weren't all cookie cutter, former security, blah, blah, blah. I suspect they had talents across the broad spectrum of business.
Yeah. Yeah, a variety. So lodging, Department of Justice in the state of Wisconsin was another one of our candidates. We did have a healthcare executive that joined us. Obviously, somebody out of the tech sector that you know well. But we also had aerospace and just a real variety of folks coming in. And the benefit was some of those talents coming in had scale, global business experience. I had a member of the team that is a former chief of staff for a global chairman for a
Beautiful.
multinational corporation. So, you
Yeah.
know, he brings a totally different lens to the conversation of what does the C-suite look at, what does the
Yeah.
chairman look at. And that's really helped us from crafting the 3-year strategy. What does our messaging look like? That it resonates not only with the business, but up to those leaders that ultimately we have to convince from a funding point of view, et cetera.
Yeah. No, I think anybody who listens to this podcast, this whole conversation, we're still going to continue, but has been beautiful. But I think for any leader that really wants to know how to be successful in driving strategy, you put it beautifully. You didn't just come in guns a blazing and say this is going to be the strategy, which happens a lot,
Mhm.
unfortunately. You took the time to look at sort of what's going on, and then you picked talent that was going to help you be successful. And that talent doesn't always have to come from a security background. And I think that's a really great lesson. And also, you wanted team members that were hungry enough that they were never going to be satisfied with status quo, right? You want them to have that hunger, and I
Yeah.
think you've obviously built that. Um, we'll go back to leadership in a second. But something you said earlier in the conversation, like when I was in CSO of Microsoft, we rolled up on the finance org. I had a great boss and all that, but man, I couldn't even spell P&L, let alone do any budgets when I first took over the job. And I learned. And you mentioned that in your background, you spent some time in finance. Um, tell us a little bit about that and, value add uh, from that experience to what you're doing now.
Yeah. So I was always very good with numbers, but I had no desire to be a finance person. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what that dynamic is,
Yeah.
but never wanted to be a finance person. But I was very good with numbers very quick. So early on, when I got brought into the corporate environment at Caldor, I was handed responsibility for all their finances, all their operating expenses, all their capital expense programs, et cetera. of which I knew very little of. I'll share just a really brief story to highlight that. So one day I got a call from the controller, who indicated to me that the state of Connecticut at the time had sent notification about a particular issue with one of our vendors around this topic called Nexus, and we don't have to get into that. But I had no clue what he was talking about. But my father-in-law at the time was a CPA, so I called him up really quickly and I said, "Can you give me some background on what this is all about?" And so it was just an example of the things you do as a leader earlier in your career to learn. You reach out, you ask questions, you don't try to mask it, try to find things out and be prepared when you get into these meetings. So it was a very valuable lesson that while I was good with numbers and I didn't know kind of all the accounting and stuff, I could adapt. I could learn it. I could reach out. I then began actually a great relationship with the controller, and learned a lot from him. So it was about understanding how finances work, the importance behind them, um, the importance behind capital project programs, and being able to show return on investment and return on assets. So I think the benefit of that early experience was being as a leader, always knowing that you can't divorce yourself from that fiduciary responsibility as a leader.
Right.
And so as you're working through programs, you're developing programs, you're presenting programs and trying to transform your business, you always have to have that financial equation. The dollar isn't, exhaustive in every organization. There are only so many resources. So you
Right.
have to be able to prove you have to be able to show a financial picture and end game as well as I like to call it. You have to have some economic logic behind your program.
Right.
Otherwise, at the end of the day, I can't speak to the CEO. I can't speak to the CFO because, I don't have that background and I don't have that economic logic built into my program. So that is something I've taken into every experience as a security leader. And in many times I've reported to the CFO. So that's been something that, I've had to be able to be on my top game because that's the language they speak. So
Yeah, exactly. And getting to know, I don't know how it worked at Tiffany or Kaiser, but we would have a series of controllers assigned to our organization, right? Some were fine, especially those that actually spent time with the businesses, and some were bean counters that, just wanted to count beans, and you have to deal with both in a way to, like you said, to maximize your ability to get what you need, right?
yeah, you're so right, Mike. And I think it's probably no different in most organizations. You have those that just look at the numbers. They don't really care to look beyond those numbers, and you have to win them over with a solid argument using their language. And then you have the others, like you said, that truly bridge the business and the finances and have a good understanding overall. I find those to be very good allies in those conversations of the strict
Amen.
bean counters. So, but it's just an important and fundamental skill, I think, that as a CSO you really have to master to a degree. I don't think you have to be able to understand a P&L overall down to the minutia, but you have
Right.
to be able to navigate some of the key terms.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. When you look at your leadership journey, I suppose it's like mine and a lot of folks that we know in the industry. Uh, there are some folks that there's just this straight trajectory, and if everything kind of goes hunky dory, but that's usually not what happens. There's usually blips along the way. In my book, I talk about things that I could have done better, different aspects of my career. Is there anything that comes to mind where, as you look in the totality of your career, where maybe for all good intentions or whatever, that you either made a mistake or something didn't go quite right, but you learned something from it that made you a better leader?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I can give you two, quick examples, and if you want to dive into anything, we can. First one was actually before I got into the business. And it does translate very specifically into leadership. So, when I was heading towards graduation in college, I made a conscious decision I was going to go into the service.
Hmm.
my heart was set on Navy SEALs. Obviously, that's not the easiest ask for any human being, even the top
And you picked
operators.
the toughest thing you could
Yeah.
get.
But I guess probably some of my naivete at that time in my age. Um, but I failed to get in because I failed the physical test.
Okay.
And it was actually a devastating experience for me. And you can do one of two things. You could blame other people, you could blame the system, you could blame. But I looked in the mirror and I said, there's only one reason why I failed that test, is because I failed to prepare. I
Mm,
didn't understand the level of expectation necessary to be successful in that field. And I said I would never underestimate again any opportunity that I pursued, that I would be diligent to truly understand and then properly prepare. So it was
mhm.
a very valuable lesson. But I looked in the mirror, and I think leaders have to look in the mirror. You can't go pointing fingers. You got to look at yourself and say, what did I did? Take responsibility, learn from it, and move on.
Right.
Which is what I did. The second was when I was with Polo, I actually got separated from Polo. I didn't make a logical move from Polo over to Tiffany.
Mhm.
I was out of work for about 5 weeks. We had some disagreement in terms of the direction of the program, and my boss at the time decided to cut the cord. And so I was out of work. And I made a decision at that time to call Tiffany and be very transparent with them about what had happened. I didn't want them to find out from anybody else, because if they were going to make a decision on if I was going to be, their new CSO, they needed to know that I was not afraid to be fully transparent and share the details, even the bad news.
Sure.
And so I did. And actually, that conversation, which ended up being a meeting in Tiffany's Manhattan headquarters with HR and ultimately who was the hiring boss, was the turning point. That boss
Hmm.
at that point in time, I found out afterwards, went to HR and said, that's the type of leader we need, not afraid to communicate bad news, takes accountability when things go wrong, and is fully transparent. I want Dave on my team. Um, you look back at those situations, and whether it was the experience with not getting into the Navy SEALs, or the separation from Polo, and you could have taken a different course. But I
Right.
think the decisions around both of those really helped shape, my leadership for the future. And very, not that they weren't painful experiences, they
Sure.
were. Um, I think the other thing the separation from Polo did was, unfortunately, in corporate life, there are times when corporations go through changes and you have to let people go. And having sat on that side of the table and having been let go enabled me to be a leader with sympathy, and being very understanding when going through these things, and being, I'd say, very real when having to have those conversations with people I had to let go at times in my
Yeah.
career.
Yeah, and we've all had to do that, you know. But yeah, those are great examples because, like you said, it could have gone south or it could have gone the way it went with you, based on attitude, right? And also introspection on your part in terms of, okay, well, what am I responsible for in terms of the situation, and then how can I make this better? I mean, that's a great leadership lesson. Um, and I'm sure, as a young man, not being able to get into the SEALs was probably really, really hard, right? And but as it turns out, I think your career ended up okay, so I think you did all right.
Yeah, I
I think
agree. I
you
have no, I have no complaints, Mike. But yeah, you're right. It was, I think as a young man, I had had some successes in sports and music and school, and so I totally underestimated what it takes to be a Navy SEAL. And so it was a great wake up call for me
yeah,
about what it takes. And as you know, based on your career, Mike, you got to be prepared when you're in these roles. And so I've always made a commitment that I would never underestimate what it takes to prepare.
that's awesome. Yeah. Um, you and I have served on the, Board of Visma together, and I talk about that in my book because I did have for a little bit sort of this imposter syndrome, even though I'd been on the board for a while, and eventually found myself like you, sort of in the executive chair, and then sitting for the first meeting, even though Imhoff was there, right, as the past president, sitting there and say, wait a minute, I'm in charge now, right? I'm running the show. It gives you a little bit of pause, but in your experience, what does board work? How does that lend itself to leadership? I mean, you don't have to be on a board to be a great leader, but what did it do for you, if anything?
Yeah. So great bringing up ISMA, and I'll just take a 2-minute pivot on the conversation for a second, because one of the things I think that is so valuable for leaders is that ability to network. And Mike, I have to thank you personally, because you were the one who introduced me to ISMA. I was not a great networker
Mhm.
prior to that opportunity. And it was born out of a conversation you and I had about global security operations centers. And you asked the question, hey, are you part of ISMA? And that really changed things for me from a networking point of view. So that never would have happened without that interaction and that question, and the fact that you actually sponsored me from ISMA. So I wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you, because it's been a game changer for me in my personal development and professional development in the industry.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think operating at that level to me, both for ISMA and now as chair of the board of the Global Center on Cooperative Security,
Mhm.
um, it puts you in my opinion, the business seat. So we as CSOs operate certainly as business leaders, but we're very focused on the delivery of security services throughout the organization and other risk disciplines. But sitting on a board or as the president of ISMA or in my current chair role, it gives you the different lens of the full value of business and how individual components are there to help drive value. And so as I think of myself as a CSO for Kaiser, I also think of everything that I'm doing through the lens of what's the CSO seeing? What's the business leadership seeing? And how am I demonstrating the value of security at all times? Is it
Mhm.
relevant? Is it tied to the overall organization's goals? Is it scaled appropriately to the environment that we're operating in? And I think those questions are helpful, because as I sit and as you sat as president, we were asking those questions of the board and the membership. And in
Mhm.
this chair role with the Global Center, looking at the various disciplines within the Global Center of how are each of you adding value to the overall mission of our association. So I think what it does is it gives me a different level of confidence when dealing with the C-suite
Mhm.
and our chairman and CEO in terms of what do they think about, what do they look at, what are the questions they're asking. And so when I actually did my presentation at Kaiser to get their endorsement for taking on this chair role at the Global Center of Cooperative Security, I was able to articulate the value it brings to Kaiser in terms of me as a leader, and how
Mhm.
it helps, stretch me and help develop some of those, skills that those that operate at the C-suite level have.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And congratulations on your role as chair, by the way. Again, you continue to push the envelope, which is great. And I enjoyed our time on the board together. I think it was a lot of fun, and it was fun seeing you, ascend to the role of president. And you did a great job as president. So I appreciate that
Thank you,
for
Mike.
not just for me personally, because it's gratifying to see that, but just for the organization. Something actually I haven't addressed with a lot of guests, and I don't know why. I guess I forget. I'm getting older. I don't know, but uh, certainly with the pandemic, on top of everything else that you have to deal with, or CSOs have to deal with on a daily basis, you're spending a lot of time at work. And I get it, you're remote, you're at home, but you're still here doing this thing, right? So this whole thing about work-life balance, I don't even know if that's the right way to put it, right? That's kind of an old term, but how do you approach like the difference between, you got your working world and you have your personal world, and you know, how do you separate the two? I mean, do you make a conscious effort, and how do you translate that to your team, right? So they're not feeling like they have to be on this computer 24/7 or wedded to their mobile 24/7. They actually get to get some downtime, even in the midst of everything that's going on.
Yeah, an excellent topic, and I'll be fully transparent. I struggle with this one at times, Mike. I really love what I do
Yeah,
as a CSO, and so when I get involved in something, I'm all in. And in addition to my Kaiser role, I've got the global center role, and same thing when I was
it
interviewed
sounds
by
familiar.
yeah, right. When I was interviewed by the Global Centers Board, again, it was, my commitment is I'm all in. So you mix those two together and then say, all right, well, how much time is left for, me personally and for Amy and the rest of the family? It's
Right.
it's it's challenging. I think one of the benefits of moving from the East Coast to the West Coast is there's so much newness for us out here,
Mm,
and the fact that you can be outside pretty much all year round. We've made a real conscious decision to take advantage of that, and with family and friends that have visited, taking them to kind of share with us some of the new experiences out here in California. So I think part of it has been the newness of where we're living out here, not having ever been out on the West Coast personally
yeah.
living.
Welcome to the West Coast, by the way. We're
Thank you.
glad you're
I wish we had done it like 20 years ago.
here. Yeah, all right.
but but it is a topic that we're all talking about at work. We talk about it. As a matter of fact, I had my entire team together last week, and we had a session on this specific topic because
Mhm.
I would say pretty much to a person, all of those folks are overachievers as well. And they really love what they do, and it's not unusual to see them online at crazy times, and
Yeah.
certainly as we're trying to build this program, there's a need to really invest a lot of time up front to get the build correct. But we are talking about the factors of working from home. How do we get people out of their homes more, not only for work and engaging with others, but just simply from a work-life balance, that it's really, really important that people spend time with family, and so it's a constant, I wouldn't say fight, but it's a constant commitment to talk about it with the team,
Mhm.
um, because I need them fresh, I need them excited. I want them to know that their life at Kaiser is part of their life. It's not their entire life, and they
Yeah,
have
right, right.
families, and they have friends, and they have other interests that I'm learning from. Because one of the things I need to do, Mike, is I need to get a hobby. I need to I need to get a hobby, something that I really like doing, and it became
Right.
very it became very apparent to me that this is something that I need to work on. My daughter and son traveled out to California, and they were with us during Thanksgiving week. And
Yeah.
my daughter dropped a bombshell that she has decided to teach herself how to play piano. And
Okay.
I'm like, well, where did that come from? And she said very specifically, she goes, as part of my commitment to having a good work-life balance, I needed to find something I could do for me. Um,
Wow.
and it was like a light went on. I'm like, that's exactly what I got to do. Now I just got to follow through it and do it.
All
But
right.
I'm
You got
not
to
sure
find
what
the right
that's going
home.
to be. Yeah, but it's hard. It's hard.
It is hard, and I'm glad that you said it so eloquently, because well, you can't be all things to everyone all the time. I mean, there are people that I know, like there are people that have worked for me that I know they don't mind being on, like you said, 24/7 on the weekends. I made it a personal thing that on the weekends, unless the balloon went up, you wouldn't hear from me on email or stuff like that. just so they didn't feel like they had to emulate anything I did. But you're right, we're all switched on pretty tightly in our profession, and so, and I'm like when you're in, they're all in, and I know Janice would joke every so often. She and Kelly Coleman would joke every so often because we're all the same. If we're doing something and they're talking to us, we're not listening to them because we're answering emails or something. They say, "You're not listening to me." I know I'm working. I don't have time to listen right now, right? But it's just a microcosm what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Uh, Getting back to leadership, and we're almost done with this, but uh, I guess as you look at leaders, what are some of the traits that you really admire in leaders that you think are essential to become a great leader?
Yeah, I think a few things. I think leaders today, really inspire me when they're kind of dedicated to this whole diversity, equity, and inclusion mindset. And even some of the things that came out of the recent OSAC conference and different
Mhm.
groups that are building around the acknowledgement around diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think is great for our industry. And I think it's important as leaders that there is a conscious commitment to diversifying our ranks. I know we talked about this at ISMA, and ISMA is doing good work to try to find ways to continue to diversify the CSO roles, and then
Mhm.
those second in commands, and building some more diversity there. I think it's really, really important work. And then as individual leaders within our own organizations, I think that that commitment to it is very, very important. Um, you know, I think I think the kind of combination of kind of vision, really having a unique vision to think about how to influence change in the industry for the long run. I don't think security has been ever more relevant than it is today. I mean, there's,
Mhm.
you know, there seemed to be this toggle towards cybersecurity, and there still is because there's so much risk in that environment. But I think so much that has happened in the world over the last few years continues to still show how valuable the physical security component is to keeping workforces safe in the
Mhm.
different industries we operate in, and especially critical here in healthcare, where workplace violence is pretty much the number one risk.
Wow.
So I think having a vision of, how do you drive change and value for the long run? So having a real clear vision of that, but also leaders that are really inclusive, those that really kind of, are looking to pull in the great ideas either from their own teams, from their customers, from others outside the organization that operate in a similar space. Those that I've always envied, those that are like great networkers. Mike, you're a great networker, and I think that is such a huge value for a leader, because through that networking you get different ideas, you get different insights, and I think when you pull all that into a program, those are the types of things that I think in this environment really make a change agent out of the senior leader, the CSO. That vision, the ability to be inclusive, to
Mhm.
embrace diversity and equity. Those are I think, kind of top skills that are required today. And I think one of the skills that I haven't mentioned that I think transcends probably every generation is I think a great leader is humble.
Mhm.
It's not all about them. It is about the value that their service brings, and the quality and the great work their team does. I always have admired people that are very humble, and it's really all about making sure the organization is successful. And so that's kind of the last quality that I feel very, very strongly about, and I try to do that within my own organization, and really try to just credit the team and all the good work they're doing. Um, those are kind of top of mind for me.
Great. Yeah. No, you exemplify all those traits and diversity, equity, inclusion, humility. All those things are. Um, we've seen the opposite, and we need more leaders like you and others that exemplify this. I Here's the last question. I always ask this of everybody, and you can take it any way you want to go with it. But you know, there are a lot of things going on in the world, and a lot of pressures on you and your and teams like yours. As you look in the landscape of the future, are you hopeful when it comes to next gen leadership and the ability that when you move on, uh, that um, the teams will be able to carry on and actually do better than even what you've been able to accomplish and will accomplish? Do you remain hopeful as a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we have somebody on our team that we've brought in that I would consider, kind of fitting into that category, next gen. And I'm just um, extremely pleased to see that the principles that, maybe times we've been struggling with and trying to integrate into our business, it's already top of mind for
Mhm.
some of these next gen leaders. I think the other thing with next gen leaders that is certainly a dichotomy for me is their ability to adapt to technology, embrace technology, leverage
Yeah,
technology.
yeah,
uh, some of these folks are just so advanced, and that technology is going to be embedded in part of our programs in the future. And they're already there. They're able to, drive all their decision making using data. They
mhm,
can represent data. They know how to leverage data. They know how to leverage all the different things we have to support us from a technology point of view. And they think in terms of technology first, which I think is a game changer for many organizations that are really trying to go digital first.
mhm,
But a lot of times maybe I wouldn't think digital first in the past, but these next gen leaders, I mean, they're already thinking about how digital first is, going to run things. So, yeah, I'm extremely hopeful. And I even see it. I see it in my kids. They're
yeah,
both in their
yeah,
20s, and the work that they're doing. But one in the insurance world, one in the manufacturing world, and they embed a lot of that. They think about diversity. They think more in terms of work life balance than I ever did when I was first cutting my teeth
yeah,
in the industry. To me, you got this job, if you work 24 hours, it still wasn't enough because you're always trying to prove yourself. But
right,
they think in terms of work-life balance because it's better for them physically, it's better for them mentally. And certainly, technology is just a no-brainer for them at this stage.
yeah,
So whether it's their personal devices or their work devices, they're just very fluid on systems and technology. So yeah, very, very, very hopeful and confident that these next gen leaders will carry the torch extremely well, if not better than I've certainly been able to do. I think the only thing that I still feel that we have that obligation to do, Mike, is continue working on making sure we diversify the security industry.
yeah.
There's still a lot of work to do that we can continue to influence that. But these next level folks are top notch.
Good. Well said. Um, well, I want to thank you, Dave, for doing this podcast. We've covered a lot of different topics. Like I said at the beginning, I consider you to be, an example of an exemplary leader that has all the traits that great leaders need to have. Um, you care about your troops. You are humble. You're strategic, and you have the right mindset, that growth mindset, the innovative mindset to drive change in the industry. So I appreciate that. Now, it'll be interesting to see in your continuing journey what your hobby is going to be that you decide to end up doing.
I will certainly share back with you, Mike, because I'm very interested myself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is great. Thanks a lot. I think the people watching this are gonna, I know they're gonna get a lot out of it. And thank you for being very open and transparent about your career and your thoughts about business and leadership. And please obviously give our love to Amy, and I know we'll see you downrange at some other events in the industry.
Yeah, can't wait. Mike, thanks so much for the invitation. It was great to just chat with you on topics that are both, very passionate for both of us. And Amy and I look forward to seeing you and Janice really soon.
Sounds good. So that's it for this Ronin Leadership Podcast episode. And again, as I said at the beginning, please share this with your friends, family, even enemies, because maybe even enemies could learn something about leadership. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and please continue to send us your comments so we can make this podcast better. And I can really appreciate the comments that you sent before. So until next time, I'm signing off and we'll talk to you later.